Good morning, everybody. We don't have anybody in the audience here, but we might have someone watching us. So I would like to call the meeting to order at 10 o'clock a.m. And I can confirm we do have quorum, but we have two members that are absent today, Councillor Cloutier and Councillor Schumacher. And with that, I would ask Councillor Clark if you wouldn't mind reading the land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you, Mayor Alcock. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty Number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions toward real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. With that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that the special council meeting agenda dated Monday, October 30th, 2023, be adopted as printed and circulated. All those in favor? And that carries. I need to borrow your pen for 1 minute. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I will move right along to our invited. Oh, I do have a motion. Sorry, I can't move along until I read the motion. I have a motion moved by Councillor Renwick, seconded by Councillor Clark. Be it resolved that committee suspend the rules of procedure relating to speaking order and limit to allow for interactive participation for agenda item 4.1, Council Strategic Planning Workshop. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay, so with that, I will turn to Sabine Matheson and Stacey Hushin with Strategy Corp, who are going to take us through the next phase of our Council Strategic Plan process. Thank you both, and welcome.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. We're very excited to be back here in lovely Huntsville, although it may be a bit rainy today. And I see lots of folks in sweaters, which suggests to me the season has changed since the last time we were here. So I'm just going to share my screen, which I guess we do through the slideshow. Yes, okay.
So go to break for 5 minutes? Do you, 5 minute break? Okay.
Wait.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we don't need the break? We're good?
Bravo.
Yay.
Success on an early Monday morning. So thank you once again for having us back. As you'll recall, we were last here, and at that workshop, we really started to think about at the highest level, what are the top priorities for the town over the next several years. And we started to map out the beginnings of a strategic framework that focused primarily on those higher order pillars and goals. Over the past couple weeks, we've worked very closely with your senior leadership team to think about if those pillars and goals are broadly what you'd like to achieve, then how could the town actually make movement or take steps to achieve those goals? And that's where these strategic initiatives that you'll see in the pages before you come into play. Over a series of workshops with your town staff, we came up with this is what they feel is realistic. They also feel like these are some of the actions that they can undertake that would make meaningful progress on these goals. So although what you're going to see on the page may look somewhat finished, it's not. And so, we wanted to start by making a really clear point that nothing is set in stone and everything is still fungible. We can still move things around. We can still make adjustments. We can still update the plan. This is another opportunity for you to provide input into this strategic plan, now having kind of the full breadth of what it actually looks like. It's a really difficult to make decisions or to think about something when you're only looking at it from the 1,000-foot level. So what we've done through your staff is come back to you with some of the details that make it a little bit more real and tangible. And so the focus today is really starting to think about, is there anything missing here? Do we feel like this is going to make the change in the town that we want to see? And so we're going to work through, the first part of our workshop today will be working through that draft strategic framework line by line, which is always really fun. And then we'll take a break, and then we're going to go back to the very foundational pieces of a strategic plan, which are the vision, mission, values. Because now that you'll have had a chance to look at the content of the strategic plan, it would behoove us to go back to those kind of core pieces around what's our vision for the future, what's the mission that we undertake every day to serve residents, and what are the values or principles that underpin that work once we know kind of what the details look like. So that's generally what our task is for today. And I just would remind you of kind of the core components of the strategic plan. I just mentioned the vision, mission, values, which are those broad overarching pieces. Then we have the pillars, those, we might call them buckets or areas of focus. And we have goals that give effect to those pillars. And today, what's new are the strategic initiatives, which are really the specific activities that'll be undertaken by your staff to deliver progress on those goals. What is not here at this time are the performance measures. And that's because your staff already have turned their attention to the business planning cycle, and included in that, as they start to map out, this, because if you think about those strategic initiatives, beneath each one of those is another list of tasks that they need to undertake to even be able to move the dial on that initiative. And so they've already started the business planning process for some of that as you head into the budget. At the same time, your staff are also working on creating a set of performance measures and iterating a set of performance measures that can be then reported back to council and to the public. The reason they're not here today is because we want to make sure that you get it right and that you have the right set of performance measures, and because there's complementary work being done by staff at the same time. So we didn't want to kind of confuse those two elements of reporting and performance measurement. And if you have any questions, I know Riva is more than happy to talk about kind of where the staff is at on their creating the dashboard and this performance measurement framework as well. So, with all of that in mind, just a couple of caveats I'd say about the draft strategic framework. When you look at some of the initiatives, you might say, yep, these sound great, but there's also a lot that the town does that isn't here. And that's not because it's not important to what you do or to those programs and services that you provide to residents, those critical things that they rely on, but it's because they live in those other areas of the town's plans, in those business plans that I just mentioned. And so, it's not so much that you shouldn't necessarily think about what's not there, but just know that you have multiple layers of plans, as the pyramid kind of shows you. And so even if you might not see it in the strategic plan, it's not that the town's not doing it, it's not that they're going to stop doing it, it's more that it lives where it should, which is in your operating and your business plans. And that's because the town has a fairly robust framework of how they organize their operations. So you don't need the strategic plan to do the heavy lifting of an operational plan. Your strategic plan, because you have the business plans, it can really be strategic in the truest sense. And so keep that in mind as we work through the initiatives, because that is what we wanted to do. Is we did want to bring you back something that was at that higher level, at that where that feeling of a strategic plan should be, knowing that you have this robust planning framework beneath you to make sure that things don't get lost and to make sure that you continue to move forward with implementation. Because ultimately, the true success of your strategic plan depends on implementation. It's much easier, I'd say, to to approve a broad goal than it is to move forward with implementation. And that's because when it comes to implementation, there are going to be additional requests made of council, whether it's requests for additional staff resources, external, funds for external consultants to execute some of the work, that sort of thing. And so the strategic plan that we're talking about today, you're not necessarily deciding on certain items. This isn't the budget. What you're doing is you're deciding to decide about something. What you're saying is, staff, we're interested in this. Take it back to the kitchen, cook it up, and bring it back to us for a decision. And so we're not deciding anything today, we're deciding that you want to decide. And your staff team are probably laughing because they remember me saying this multiple times during our workshop. But it's a really important distinction here as we think about all of this, because ultimately the budget is a critical moment in the implementation of the strategic plan. The budget is the accelerator pedal. It will tell you how fast, how much of something to do, but you can also ease off. And you could say, we're not going to do this. We're going to shift our resources to here. And that's okay. But ultimately, the budget is where the strategic plan really becomes real. And that's when you'll see staff, bring back certain items to you for approval to make this strategic plan move forward. And there'll be a number of, probably moments even in this workshop where you'll want a little bit more detail on the initiatives from your staff, and you can certainly ask for that. But just know that everything will be coming back to you either through a staff report or the budget. And so with that in mind, the strategic plan, this may be our last kind of workshop, but it's once you approve it, it's really only the beginning of the journey, not the end. So I think that's an important distinction. So let's move. I'm not sure, Sabine, if you wanted to add anything before I jump ahead ambitiously. Get her.
No, I would just say I was kind of enjoying the sensation of not being at all required. It's kind of a cool thing when you sort of look over and you say, yep, I would have said that. What I think is really interesting is as we go into the updated strategic plan framework, where Stacey's about to go, we've kept both the original version that we had as of the end of regulation time in the last game, and so now what we've done through working with staff is updated it, built in more of the streamlining and wordsmithing, which was designed to sort of probably capture what you all would have done had you had the chance to pore over it a little bit more. But the real test of it today is whether that's how you feel about how it's evolved, and I think that'll be really interesting. And just for the benefit of folks who may be watching online, the great criticism or misunderstanding about strategic plans is what happens when you don't have all this back end stuff that Stacey's been talking about. And people say, oh, they're so vague. They don't mean anything. You could drive a truck through it. It's not really very important, is it? And of course, it's terrible if the conclusion of your most important strategic document is that it's not very important because it's not connected to reality. And so the metaphor I often like to use is that we're really building a bridge between something that reduces the strategy to one page and then the infinite amount of detail through operating plans and budgets that means that it is real and trackable and traceable. And we sometimes use the discussion around SMART goals as being a way to kind of understand that. And when we understand that, SMART is an acronym, and when we understand that it's really council's role to say what's relevant to the community in a way that's specific enough to be understood, and that knocks off the R and the S out of SMART. But it's really staff who are the experts in what's achievable and by when and how would you measure it. And if you build the bridge between those two perspectives, then you actually have a really strong plan. And if you have a plan that's dominated by staff saying, well, this is what we always do, and so this is what we're going to do, that's a staff-dominated plan. And if you have council saying, well, we want to do all this stuff, but staff's saying, well, that's very interesting, but you neither have the authority nor the resources to do it, then that's a fail. But what's really strong is when council informed by the community and staff informed by their professionalism and understanding of what must be done and what should be done for all the technical and professional reasons. And you build that bridge between those two things, then you have a plan that's actually likely to make a difference instead of be left on a shelf. And that's what we're here to do. So anyway, I'll go back to not being necessary, because
Highly necessary, but I'm actually going to move to slide 6 just to show you. You can see that we made some fairly significant changes. Some, were more about the wording, which I know we chatted about quite extensively at our last workshop, and I'm sure I said, wordsmithing by committee is never a good idea, so we took it back and have wordsmithed a little bit. But you can also see that we've condensed certain things, or we've moved what were once maybe very specific goals. They're more strategic initiatives. So we've made some, important changes, I think, here based on our conversation last time. But to go up to kind of on slide 5, which is the new framework without all the highlights and without the direct edits, this, we might say, is your plan on a page. It's the highest level of the plan. It's those broad areas where you'd like to take action, as well as some of the specific goals. I'd be interested in your thoughts. I think just looking at this as it stands, how does this feel? How do the edits that we made to the framework feel overall?
I just put my hand up, so I'm hoping someone will acknowledge. I think you're looking for input, right?
Yes, yep.
So one of the things, before I make a quick comment, I was so happy, Sabine, that you said what you did. You hit the nail on the head with respect to the public perception that it's vague and you can drive a truck through it. I met an 18-year-old friend of mine on the weekend, and his comment was, well, I've looked at it, and you can drive a truck through it. It doesn't say anything. And I said, oh, okay, let's look at it. And after we talked about, as you say, the pillars and that general direction, I think he started to get what you're saying. So as we move forward to that connection with the public, I hope we are able to communicate that really effectively. I love the way you did. So I thought it was interesting that you made reference to that. One of the comments I had with the slight changes is I think there's been a focus around this table through different other tables, is the need to rebuild or change our existing community assets, town assets. And I think we've had discussions. We had it in a budget discussion about our public works facility, and something that we just are starting to pay attention to. In the Community Services Master Plan, there's some chat about what we do with our existing parks, and do we have a stronger maintenance of our existing infrastructure. So I was looking at that, and it's sort of a theme. It is a theme of I don't know if rebuilding, whatever it is. And I know in what we had some reference to that. And it's not quite the same in the revision. We talk about, infrastructure around active transportation. And I guess it would be in the balanced growth part, but and maybe it's there, but I'm not seeing it. So from my perspective, I think that is, at least I see this council thinking about our existing infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if the council agrees with me or not. I don't know. Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Worship. And I would agree with you, but if I look at the balanced growth section and the engage in proactive, sustainable planning to support vibrant communities, I think it would, there's an element in that sentence or in that box where sustainable planning to support vibrant communities. And I think having, like you said, a public works building and looking after our infrastructure would be in that. But I hear what you're saying, that it is a little bit vague as to where that would land. But when I read it, I thought that's probably where it would go. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I've jumped ahead now to the first pillar, looking at the initiatives, and we've just highlighted that develop a 20-year facility plan to map out the future of key municipal infrastructure. There's also updating the Parks Master Plan. I think getting at that, looking at all of our assets and amenities, the ones that we have, as well as planning for future ones.
And trust me, I did read it, so there you go, I forgot.
Well,
So-
there's
and there it
something
is.
like, there's
And
probably
there it is, right there.
There's probably 50 or 60 initiatives, so I
No,
think we can give everyone a
so
pass for not
that's-
remembering
Well,
everyone.
I'm greatly relieved now. There we go.
But,
And thank you for that, Councillor Renwick. Thank you.
but Madam Mayor, there's something really important about what you said, though, which is the headings on the pillars, and then the sentences that describe the pillars, and then the specific initiatives that elaborate on what they mean. And the earlier version was the somewhat clunky upgraded infrastructure and improved connectivity. And what it didn't really address was the idea that, boy, you know, Huntsville, it's going to face growth. And so what it was talking about was infrastructure and connectivity, but it wasn't really addressing the approach to the management of growth. So now it says balanced growth, which is addressing the change in the context of growth. But you're right, by making the editorial choice, it puts less of an emphasis on maintaining what we had. Now, so it is in the detail, but I think the sense was that the true strategic direction was, look, we're going to have to manage growth through a combination of balancing what we've got and accepting what we have, which seemed like a more realistic definition of the challenge. That because if I think about what you're likely to be facing as a council over the next couple of years, I don't think your real challenge is upgrading infrastructure and improving your connectivity. I think your real challenge is keeping Huntsville from turning into something that you never expected it to be. And so that's probably why the heading changed. But if you don't think the heading adequately captures the idea of maintaining what you have, then that would be a really good reason to change it. So that's, and in fact, the other idea for where we could change it is if you can jump to the next slide. Yeah. You see how we've added in a sentence that elaborates on balanced growth before you get into the goals. And this one is written as embracing forward thinking and sustainable planning. We're committed to preserving Huntsville's distinct character. So we're preserving your character, but we haven't said we're preserving your infrastructure yet. While embracing vibrant and connected communities that provide housing choices for all. We could easily, in that sentence, add in a concept of maintaining and upgrading, because you actually have to get down to the next tier of level under engage in proactive sustainable planning, sub-point under that, initiative number 5, to get all the way to what Councillor Renwick pointed out. So it could be that we need to elevate it back up there.
From my perspective, I love that, Sabine. I obviously defer to council, but I think it emphasizes that need, that we need to pay attention to what we have, right? So it sort of, we're also really keen on building new things and creating new parks, you know, but that comes back to the balancing, especially when you have more development. But I think it, for me anyway, I think it's an important feature. Councillor Stone.
Thanks. I think the next pillar actually, it speaks to protecting what we have, our parks, and the natural environment is the thing that we want to protect and keep. So the next pillar kind of answers keeping the parks and keeping the trees, and so I don't know that we need to address it in the first pillar.
Maybe not. My comment would be absolutely in the Parks Master Plan, all of that, which I love, and I shouldn't bounce before everybody's had a. But that doesn't cover something like paying attention to facilities. right? So when, this is looking out, right? So something like when the pool needs to be replaced, well, it's in our strategic plan, if this is core to what we do. Not to say we wouldn't say that anyway, but, again, I'll go back to Medill. Somehow we're in a position where we haven't, this council, previous councils, haven't contributed to the rebuilding of Medill. So it supports that particular, we haven't financially. So for the first time, this council's put money aside in a reserve for the rebuilding of Medill, or something with Medill, something. And so I'm just saying, it supports that decision if you have it here. And again, I'm not so fussed that if we don't change it, I'm not going to lose sleep at night. But I just thought that that was something. And so I am now looking at Councillor Fitzgerald because he would like to respond to that, I think.
I agree with your thought process there, that, maybe we need to make our goals a little more finite in the opening statement. Sabine has suggested that we could add it in. I think for clarity for our community, maybe we could do that, give them a little more direction. I thought we did give money to Medill. I thought we gave them $4,000 somewhere along the way, early on. It's not really relevant.
I mean, I think the point being that we, in this so far, very draft preliminary discussions, we decided to put some money aside in a reserve. And that, as far as I understand, was kind of a first time. So,
It's good planning.
yeah.
We should
Anyway,
continue with that.
enough, I'm not going to belabor it. As I said, that was a beginning. So, anyone else who would like to comment on that part?
Seeing none, what I would maybe suggest is that we can start working through the tables with the initiatives, because often those then make us go back to the goals and the pillars and those opening statements. So we've kind of already started. So Madam Mayor, you put us on a great path. So to get started with pillar number 1 around balanced growth, and we just read out kind of the opening sentence that's really intended to encapsulate what this pillar entails. So the first goal is to engage in proactive, sustainable planning to support vibrant communities. The initiatives include reviewing your intensification policies, encouraging mixed use and locally appropriate development to optimize land use and address different community needs, developing an implementation plan and financial strategy to move forward with the waterfront development strategy, updating the Parks Master Plan, and then the 20-year facility plan. Comments on these? There's a lot here. It's a lot of work. Councillor Stokes.
All right, so the first one, review intensification policies to refocus growth on urban centers. We're already doing that, and we're also contemplating the fact that we may need to grow beyond the urban centers with intensification.
Would maybe staff like to comment on this one?
Through you, I don't believe at this time there is any anticipation that we would need to expand our urban boundaries, because we have quite a significant amount of land that is within the boundary that's vacant, that is meant to be serviced in the future. However, it would form part of our official plan review when we do one next.
So,
We've got some
Stacy?
It's open dialogue, so I'm
Okay.
confused about if I can jump in or not. So-
I turned my
But
mic
on
off
that
first.
point, sorry, Jay, did you?
Yeah.
Did he? Okay.
Just to comment on the concentrating on urban development. I think we've had a lot of discussion around this table that it's great in theory, but in the real life, there's not a lot of affordability or availability of that thought. So I know that we've discussed in planning committee about changing some of the outside the urban area requirements for size and frontage and that kind of thing, because we feel it doesn't meet the needs of our community currently. And it's a tough sell, and we haven't really focused in and honed in on it and made that commitment to do that. But I think around the table, that's the general consensus, and everyone has consideration for it because it will help meet our housing crisis needs. So at some point, we have to stop talking about it and change it. And we keep talking about it, so I don't know when that's going to happen. So I think we're missing that as consideration in our initiatives.
I'm going to follow up on that because I agree. And I think the way, and to our director's comment, absolutely, our policy is that we have intensification in our OP and all of that. And I think that there's recognition that we're not saying, we're opening up the boundary and saying, let's have more, many, many more plans of subdivision in the rural areas and that sort of thing. But to your point, Councillor Fitzgerald, what we have talked about is looking at the policy that you actually discourages any thinking about how you might have projects. You might have projects that talk about maybe workers' housing that's associated with a particular industry. And currently, it's difficult to crack that nut because we don't allow it. Or, and I'm thinking of examples that reflect what you said, right? Or a small plan of subdivision that's very near the boundary, but it's not in the bound, it's not within the limit. So therefore, it's an outright rejection. We don't have any way to look at those one-offs, if you can look at it that way. So I agree with you. I think we need to have a bit more flexibility in, without completely blowing up our existing policy. So I don't know, maybe flexibility or something. And I'm looking to the director to respond to that.
I just want to add one more
Yeah.
thing before we move to the director. It doesn't even have to be projects of scope. It could be as simple as infill. Infill on smaller lots that don't qualify as a lot now could alleviate some of our problems. So we have to start small thinking and then expand on that.
Exactly. So exactly. And Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thanks, and I couldn't agree more with the conversation that we've been having. I mean, I think about the time I've been on council so far, and I think about the number of lots that we've approved here at this table that didn't meet the current standards as far as frontages, mostly frontages for the most part. And I think there is a desire from this council to approve more rural lots, so to help us address you know, the lack of housing and stuff. So I think absolutely that specific concern should be addressed and definitely reviewed, because we're approving those lots anyway right now, for the most part.
Thank you for that. And I think also, if you look at those sites where we have, there have been other offsets, right? They've been extra large lots or whatever, but it's the frontage that didn't meet our standard. So again, the word flexibility, I don't think anybody around this table is supporting, oh, let's now have holus bolus sprawl. No one supports sprawl, right? But what we are talking about is the ability to have more flexibility to review these cases that come in and that provide more opportunity to do one of our other major pillars, which is more affordable housing. So,
I think what we'd like to do is probably amend the initiative to build in that concept, because it does seem like there's consensus.
I think,
And I think Councillor Morrison
yeah,
is
he
patiently
did.
waiting.
He
Yeah.
did, sorry.
I just want to jump in. I've made it very clear what I want to do with our rural communities. I live on a rural road, and for many, 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 many years, Councillor Clark and I were working in real estate, selling 200-foot lots at 2 acres, and it worked. And I know that the mayor that was in position when that change got made, because it made sense at the time. There were so many lots, we weren't in the housing crisis we're in now, and that changed to 440 feet. And it didn't really have a huge impact then. But now, we can't say we're serious about affordable housing and not consider more rural development. And we talk about environmental impacts. And it's actually what I've read and studied. It's more environmentally conscious to have a tertiary septic system in a drilled well than it is to use the energy we use to pump sewage and water around our district. So the environmental angle doesn't work for me anymore, to not do it. And I'm in favor, in fact, if you look at my affordable housing notes, you'll see I want to bring a motion this month about changing the requirements. To Councillor Fitzgerald, like, we talk about it, let's get this done. Because I want people to start to come to the planning department now and realize, oh, I have 1,000 feet, I can actually get 5 lots. That's great. And for some of them, it's the difference of their kids staying in our town, have enough money to afford their house because their mortgage just doubled. You know, and we're telling people in our town, no, you can't sever that big piece of land anymore. And I think that was good at the time, but it's not good anymore. So I'm probably going to talk to Councillor Fitzgerald about bringing a motion this month to address that.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Armour.
Thanks. I'm just wondering, we talk about reducing this. This is really going against our official plan, though. So do we need to open our official plan and start reviewing it before we can actually take that next step and actually reduce the size of lots? I'm just talking about you're bringing a motion forward that's going to be going against what we did, so.
Yeah, I think you'd have to have an OP amendment, I would assume, in part of that motion, right? So that the OP...
No question you would.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to let Director Maxwell, and I appreciate what you're saying. I think for Stacey and Sabine, they're getting the sense of where we're going rather than let's not drill down on that today. But I think the deputy is absolutely right. It's an OP amendment. And I would love, I think my feeling is we're all in, there's a consensus around the table. We would like to be far more flexible and have a policy around it, no question about it. And maybe, could we give our director an opportunity to jump in? Would she like an opportunity?
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the discussion, and yes, there has been quite a bit of talk around the Planning Council table about looking at our rural lot standards and whether or not they should be amended to make it smaller frontages, smaller lot sizes in the rural area. I would note that we would have to do quite a bit of public consultation to ensure that that's actually what the public wants, is to change how we're developing in our rural areas. Because the official plan policies were all crafted based on public consultation we'd heard to date and environmental issues that speak more to keeping our green spaces whole so that there's traffic, it's not traffic when it's animals, but so that there's paths for wildlife to travel and keeping those large green spaces intact and not dividing them all up, which is part of why we talk about deer wintering areas and things like that in our planning meetings. But there is also the sense of whether or not there's long-term affordability to have rural development expanded to those extents with people requiring more services in the rural areas, transportation. So would we be looking at expanding our bus routes to include rural areas? There's quite a hefty discussion there that we'd be happy to have if council wanted us to look at doing an official plan amendment. The other side of it too is that we were waiting on the PPS to be finalized, which I was anticipating was going to happen this fall, and then we could do a conformity exercise at that point.
I appreciate all of that. Sorry, Sabine. Yep.
So this is a great conversation about how the strategic direction, which seems to sort of summarize as, look, guys, we want to increase the flexibility in rural planning to provide more opportunity on affordable housing. And what the director's quite appropriately said is there's all kinds of operational steps to get there. So for the purposes of a strategic plan, we've said that we're going to engage in proactive, sustainable planning to support vibrant communities. That probably doesn't specifically give the hint yet about in what manner. So then you could jump down to initiative number 2. Number 1 might have been helpful because it says intensification policies to refocus growth on urban centers, but that's actually too specific. That's not helping us on rural lots. So then the next one says encouraged mixed use. That's not helpful. But then it says, and locally appropriate development to optimize land use and address different community needs. And so I guess it's almost a question for the director. What direction would you need this to give you in order to give you a hook to hang the activities that you were describing about considering, through all the appropriate channels of official plan amendment and that? Would it be as simple as saying, take measures to increase flexibility in land use planning to achieve affordable housing goals? Or should it be more specific in order for it to be something that can be trackable? I mean, what would be most useful? Because ultimately this is about creating the bridge so that we avoid the problem that the mayor's 18-year-old friend pointed out, that, well, that's too vague, it doesn't say anything, and how are we going to track it? So to us as draftspeople, as long as we know what they need to hear in order to give effect to what you want, then it's been a totally useful conversation. So what would make sense from a planner's point of view in terms of the direction?
Thank you. What you said about the flexibility, I think, would be a great step. We could be very direct and say review official plan or review planning legislation and policies to, I don't know, identify areas where amendments could be made, something along that line.
My apologies, can you repeat the first part of that, Kirsten?
I don't think I remember what I said.
No, it was something about official plan policies.
Yeah,
Review
reviewing-
planning legislation
Yeah,
and policies.
and official plan policies.
So it's a bit,
It's a
because
bit more
it kind of
direct,
ties into
yeah.
what's going to happen anyway, right? Like the district, I can't believe it, but the district is starting their next OP review next year, 2024.
And
So we don't have to start ours that quickly. So if we put something that's that high level, from my perspective, it doesn't.
yeah, I think the problem we run into is that we have to be consistent with the PPS and conform to the district. So depending on what changes they're intending to make, we would be doing an OPA and then doing another one to ensure we were conforming. So there's a bit of a timing issue there as well, which is why we haven't brought forward any amendments at this point.
So far, though, if have a consensus around the table that we're looking for more flexibility, that's, to me, I look at that and say, at the very least, we know that there's agreement that we can have these discussions and without offending our current policy, right? And I think that, to me, that would work for me, to know that if there's a proposal that comes forward and from an environmental perspective it works and it's resolving a couple of other issues, especially around housing and affordability, then I think I want to know that we can have that conversation. So I don't know what the wording is that says, how is it comfortable that we have that conversation?
If I could jump in, I'd like to say, let's be more direct. I mean, talking about flexibility and talking about looking at this, it's still vague. And I think when you talk about deer wintering areas and impact on services, that is a discussion that gets dealt with at every planning application, right? So right now, we would gladly look at putting a road in an urban center on services, a brand new road with sidewalks and everything else to have 12 lots. But we won't allow a 200-foot lot where the road already exists, it's already being plowed. So I think we should say to initiate, if we all agree that we want to be flexible on rural development, be direct in the wording to say, initiate the process to allow more rural development or something along those lines. Or unless that's not what we want to stay vague, but I think I'm hearing around the table that almost all of us believe we need more rural development to help our locals keep their land and to allow more affordable housing. So let's be direct with it and have it specific. Start the process, start the planning, start the thing, instead of maybe look at flexibility one day, you know?
And I
Okay.
think one of the key elements in this is that it's not a process that is lengthy and cumbersome and expensive currently for our community to do this. So it needs to be streamlined so people can do it. And as far as the transportation piece, when people decide to live in a rural setting, they're not looking for those amenities. They've made that decision. I chose to live where I live, knowing that there's very few services available to me, but that's my choice. I wanted to live where I couldn't see another house or touch another house reaching out the side of my house. So we have to leave it up to the public to make those decisions, and we provide them the opportunity for them to make those decisions. I think that's us doing our job effectively and not worried about every single person in our community needs transportation. And that doesn't work, and it's not a good philosophy. There's holes in it. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we can work with this with staff and come back with
That's great.
I think we've got
Thank
it.
you
I
for
think
that.
we've got what we want, which is the consensus from council, and now we'll go and work with your staff team to tighten up the language so that we can put that direction onto the page.
Right.
Any other comments on any of the other initiatives here? Part of my job is to keep us on track. We got to one. It is slow going at the first, but then I find,
If I may say, and I think this speaks to the 20-year facility map to map out, a facility to map out the future of key municipal infrastructure. Is 20 years too long? Should we go 10 years? Or do you think 20 years out is something that really, yeah? Councillor Fitzgerald is nodding his head over there. Yeah.
I think it sets the tone. You know, we started out, my first term on council was our 10-year roads plan, and we still haven't accomplished all of it. And so I think to do it justice, you need to plan for that longer term. In fairness to the community and to future councils. So, you know, we've done our due diligence and we think this is set in the right direction. It doesn't mean that they can't change direction a little bit, but we've done enough to set up the future for them. And I think to do anything less doesn't do the plan justice.
other comments? Okay, so why don't we move to our next goal, if everyone feels comfortable, which is around housing. Work with our partners to strive to meet our housing needs. So the first initiatives is to conduct a housing needs assessment to identify those needs and gaps. The second, logically, would be developing an action plan to address those needs based on what you find. And then the third is to continue your collaboration with the district and other governments to create attainable housing options and also communicate those programs to residents. How do we feel about these three? There's a bit of a nice logic here, right?
So we're talking about conducting a housing needs assessment to identify local housing needs and gaps. This is for our council. And kind of what the district does too. So is this redundant, or a lot of those gaps and needs have been identified? And every year, there's an update to the housing and homelessness plan at the district. Every year, that's updated. And so I look at this, given its a place of prominence, and I think, is that redundant? Or is that, are we saying we should do this over and above what the district does? I think housing is like one of the number one, if not the number one issue. So I feel a bit like, I just want to see that this is helping us move it forward.
Yep.
And to me, I look at that and think, well, now I'm like my 18-year-old friend. And I think, yeah, it's being done. And is that helping it move it forward? And if it is, then, and certainly everybody can say, well, no, that helps it move it forward. That's just my view on that one.
Yeah, I think we can probably have staff to speak to this as well, but I think one of the pieces is you don't solve for Y until you know exactly what X is. And so we are seeing in a number of municipalities who are conducting kind of very localized needs assessment, even at the area municipality level, so that they can really deep dive and understand what the gaps are, even from an income perspective, from the type of housing, that sort of thing. and then coming up with a plan that addresses those needs, but also defines what the municipality's role is. Because I think coming out of this action plan, there would be a lot of steps or actions that would not be entirely within your jurisdiction as an area municipality to undertake. And so this plan would also act as a bit of a communications vehicle and provide some direction to council in terms of what is the town's role in addressing Huntsville's housing needs. As to the degree to which this would be different from what the district is doing, I will let staff speak to that.
Yeah, for sure, and, but I do like develop a housing action plan. That for sure. I'm there. That we've talked about for a long time, and specifically for the town of Huntsville.
Yeah.
I think as a part from the district. We've talked about, we had a housing session at council, we know the tools, so let's take those tools and figure out which ones we want to use. The action plan. That I really like. And again, I'm not going to lose sleep over if we have to have the conduct of housing needs. It's just that I look at and I think, well, I think the district does it, but that's just my view.
Okay, go ahead, Jason. Or Councillor Fitzgerald.
I think we kind of do need to endeavor to do that, because each community has different geographical, economic, and employment opportunities and situations that kind of differentiate between ourselves. So if the district does an overall thing, we have different transportation needs, or one community has maybe a better transportation system than the other community has. So employment and just general living conditions. So I think the specific study should be important to us. We do have probably the biggest number in the district of homelessness. So clearly that makes us different. We have the biggest growth experienced in the district. So I think the specific study is important for us to do.
Very much appreciated, and the CAO wants to jump in. And I don't, certainly I'm happy to be wrong on this. And I just keep thinking that the district actually, in their data collection, they are able to say what's happening where. So I just don't want to discount that a lot of that work, when we do the enumeration list of homeless in our community, we actually know where they are. So the CAO.
Thank you, Worship. So I think the plan speaks to it in that the goal does state that we'll work with our partners to strive to meet our housing needs. So the intention of the strategic plan is for council to say where they're interested in us pursuing it. Then staff would then endeavor to carry out the process. That would absolutely be in consultation with the District of Muskoka. So I think it's just recognizing that, yeah, we need to figure out what we need. Then we need to put a plan in place to identify how we're going to address it. And we're obviously going to work with other levels of government. So we would definitely work with the district on any information they have.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, I agree with Mayor Alcock 100%. I think the Mayor Alcock and Director Maxwell and myself sit on the Affordable Housing Task Force 2.0. And I will say that Director Maxwell, Nancy, myself, we're always emailing each other stuff. Like we have a handle, I think, on some of where the gaps are because of all the work that's being done throughout the entire province, but more specifically at the district. So we're all bringing, as Huntsville's reps, the three of us, to the table ideas. We're gathering all that data. I think that's going to be enough data for us to have an action plan. What I don't like about number one is I see another hurdle. I see another step. I see more work to be done before we actually get to the real important part, which is the action plan. So I would like to see it either change so it's all in one. So it's one thing like analyze housing needs to come up with an action plan or something, like, as opposed to do an assessment. Let's just analyze the needs, which we are pretty aware of, and then do the action plan. And I know Director Maxwell's already setting up meetings for us to start that process. So I think I'd like to skip right into action.
Okay, and I think the director would like to jump in.
Thank
Because
you.
we keep talking about her, so.
Thank you.
You should really be coming to the table. You're over there and
I
it's
think
hurting my neck.
My
but
piece
there
is
we
going to
go.
be done, I think, pretty quick. So just to give you a bit more information about the housing assessment is, I do know the district does do a huge amount of work, but their focus is really on, when we talk about the continuum, the people that need emergency shelters, homelessness, transitional housing, whereas the town doesn't have the ability to really do much in those areas, and we would be looking more at the market rental, affordable rental, affordable ownership, what we can do in those instances, and where we would need to have the most information provided. So whether or not it's a question of the research being done to say, yes, we should only be approving townhouses moving forward because nobody is looking for single-family homes anymore, or things along those lines, that's, our focus really needs to be more on the right-hand side of that continuum when we're talking about rental, affordable rental, market rental, and ownership, as compared to the needs that the district identifies more fully with all of their social programs.
So I think that's, personally, I agree, and I think that's great. I still like Councillor Morrison's suggestion of combining the two, because I would respond that at Planning Council, and you more than anybody would know, that we're already saying we want more mixed development. So if no one, I don't think there's a developer that's coming forward these days with just single-family dwellings. And well, maybe there is, and you're having to deal with that. And so maybe what that is, what you need support from us through policy to say, no, this is our policy. You can't come forward with that. You've got to come forward with towns that are more affordable and that sort of thing. And now that you say that, I think, oh, okay, that makes sense, that it's identified here in the strategic plan. So maybe I just disagreed with myself. So, and our director is really smart, smarter than most people in the room, so there you go. So I don't know where that leaves us. Councillor Morrison.
I think Director Maxwell is right. Like, we do have to analyze things on an ongoing basis. Like, we'll never stop analyzing. I just don't want to put like an actual initiative to staff, that staff does an analysis, comes back 6 months later, then we look at this, and then we start planning. Let's do the analysis while we're doing the action plan and just get things moving.
So do you two have enough with that discussion to sort of guide us through that?
I think a good way to do it might be if the second one becomes the first, which is develop a housing action plan to identify solutions, with inputs related to the overall status of market rental and ownership housing or something. Because I think the importance of calling it out as an activity is, I think what staff is saying to you is, yeah, we wish we had that, we don't, and it ain't gonna do it itself. And so you actually need to acknowledge that as an activity that needs to be resourced. And so that's why it's there. I don't think it's intended to be a hurdle delay. I think it's intended to be a thing that needs to be done. And I see the director raising her hand.
If you don't mind, sorry to interrupt, I was just being reminded as well that you need a housing needs assessment in order to apply for funding, like the Rapid Housing Initiative funding that CMHC was putting forward. So if we can combine it, that's great, but we do need to have something that identifies our needs before we'd be able to apply for funding.
That's another fantastic point. So I think our message is clear, right? We need to satisfy what you need in order to help us move it forward. And we need to know that we're in action mode as opposed to let's do some more work around this and then we can get to action. And I think we're all actually on the same page given the discussion. That's my view. Yeah.
I think Councillor Morrison's fear is that we put the brakes on and wait for a study, and I don't think that's the objective or the implied idea behind it. So it's keep doing what we're doing and move ahead. And I think, as Director Maxwell alluded to, we need the plan for funding applications. So
I think
we have to do it, and we should do it in congruency with the district, but it's really specific.
So the emphasis in the strategic plan, though, I think should capture all of that.
Yeah, and we can do that. That's why clauses are great, and words such as including, and so we can, I think what we're hearing is bring the two initiatives together with a focus on action plan, but also making sure that we're getting the other pieces that your staff need that direction to get done, and so that you're not perhaps missing out on opportunities as well, including funding. So, any other comments? Really covered off. I think the last one's pretty self-explanatory around needing to continue your work with the district. So, on that note, why don't we move to the next two goals? Goal 3 is to improve local and district roadways through investment and collaboration, with initiatives around exploring opportunities to enhance construction and maintenance of the roads, reviewing and modifying where necessary development standards and OP policies to incorporate complete streets, and then partnering with the district to find ways to improve efficiencies with roads, engineering, and improve coordination. So capital projects, that sort of thing.
I apologize, can I go back to housing for 1 second? Sorry. It was the third point about collaborate with the district and other levels of government, absolutely, no question. And I just want to be sure that, and maybe work with our partners to strive to meet our housing needs. That's over there. And in the 3, it doesn't specifically say work with all partners, all NGOs, all partners, community organizations. And if that's covered in where we say work with our partners, but we don't specifically say that, or do we? Did I miss it?
No, but you could broaden out number 3 to include collaborate with the district, other levels of government, and community partners, something
And
like
community
that.
partners. I think it's important because we're about to embark on collaborating with the Muskoka Land Trust. So I think if we have that as a high level, it's really important it's one of the only ways we might deliver anything, so
Of course,
that would be great.
yeah.
Thank
these
you.
are- that's
Sorry
great
about
addition.
that.
So shall we return to roads with that amendment? So how do we feel about these initiatives? We did hear a lot about roads during the engagement, surprise probably to none of you. Anything here?
I have a quick, sorry, Councillor Stone.
That's
you
all
go
right. I
ahead.
was just going to say, do we need to add in there that we're looking at active transportation lanes on our roads somewhere? I know we do later in the program, but if we're looking at roads, we want to make them wider.
Right.
Is that, go ahead.
Thank you. Is that not sort of drilling in too deeply? I
Yeah,
think
into
that's a specific, as opposed to saying that we are developing the active transportation network, and that within that umbrella, we can say that we want to have the shoulders and the added, like, do we have to specifically name what it is? If it's, we want like an overarching, this is just our guideline, right? As opposed to getting into the nitty-gritty of what we specifically want.
Because presumably there'll be a policy brought forward that's saying as you do road reconstruction work, that you're expanding the length of sidewalks, so that would come elsewhere, but
You also have it, I think, incorporate complete streets,
yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that can mean lots of stuff.
And you
Lots
can
of
think in
stuff.
your head as each one of these numbers has like a whole pile of A, B, C, D, E, F, G right underneath. You just don't see them here because that's not really the purpose of the strat plan.
I have a quick question. What enhance construction? Explore opportunities to enhance construction. I may be reading it, I'm just not quite sure. And maintenance of our roads, that is really clear, the maintenance of our roads. Enhance construction, is that like
Better practices.
better
That's what I was gonna
practices?
say, yeah.
So that's what that is, better practices. Okay. Maybe we could say better practices or something. I don't know, because there'll be idiots like me who'll say, what does that mean, enhance construction? I know, sorry.
We want it to be clear because as we said in our first workshop, this is also your communications document out to
Right.
the public. And we talked a lot about, and you'll see it in the plan, the importance of how we communicate with the community. And so we want to make sure that this is intelligible to everybody, right? From
Right.
18-year-olds to
Right.
even us in the room. So
Okay.
we can certainly wordsmith a bit where needed.
Or not, just a comment.
But we'll take
So,
it away and think about it.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks. Just a quick comment on about the roads. So I know we do roads need studies every, what is it done, every 5 years? So I think one of the ways we could look to explore opportunities to enhance road construction is we know that there's a lot of roads that need done long before the roads need study comes to us. So how do we, I guess, speed up the process a little bit rather than waiting for a study to come? Because like I look at the last council meeting, we had a road that came to this council, which might have been part of a prior roads needs study, but we were able to do something about a road that we didn't necessarily have to wait for a current road needs study. So just wondering, if we need to look into how to dive a little deeper into that, rather than always waiting for that study to get done.
Great question.
It's a
for
great
staff.
question for staff. I'm going over there.
Before staff goes, I think it starts with us, with the levy. Like, that's our most restrictive covenant on anything we do with the roads is the levy. So, you know, sometimes we have surpluses in that department. Sometimes we go way over with emergencies and stuff that we just can't do. I know there's always 20 roads that I would like to see done before a roads need study, but
Right,
we don't have the money.
right.
So until we get off the wallets and put the money, like the best thing we ever did for our roads was a 10-year plan and commit that extra money, you know? And we can't stop, we have to increase it. So, for me, that's really one of the only answers, other than trying to get some of these practices into use, where enhanced methods and partnerships.
True. I think our director is going to, yeah, jump in.
So the roads needs study only forms one input into how roads are being done. Councillor Fitzgerald rightly points out that a 10-year capital plan, most municipalities have that 10-year capital plan for roads. That makes perfect sense. That needs to be developed. It's under development right now, just as an aside. There are, you know, within both of those plans, we need then the flexibility to adapt, which council's already granted to an extent, or maybe granting through the budget process, in terms of being able to basically shuffle the deck, you know, within the existing budget structure. So those are the key tools. But then comes the monitoring. So being able to measure, to look at the roads, the condition of the roads within the 5-year cycle of the roads needs study, and then reprioritize based on actual facts and what is going on with the roads. So those are all of the inputs, and you know, the roads needs study is it's a moment in time, once every 5 years. We need to keep that information up to date, as current as possible, so that we can make the right decisions about which roads to do when.
Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor.
I was going to go along the same line. I just think a key to roads is that we need to keep our good roads good so we can work on the bad roads. And I think that's where we fall short with sometimes these 5-year, 10-year plans. We let the good roads get bad. So I think that's a key to it right there.
If we go back to the wording in this discussion, is this wording not reflecting that? And, or maybe it is, like explore opportunities to enhance the construction and maintenance of our roads, kind of covers that. It's saying, let's explore those opportunities. So Councillor Clark, to your point, it's saying this is just the overarching goal, and does this include that ability to say, no, this road's got to go forward. So we got to figure that one out. And having, again, I go back to the flexibility to be able to make that decision with staff. And I think it probably does that. I think. Any input? Yes, Helena.
I think that the discussion that we just had at our last meeting in regard to the budget and the infrastructure that we're looking at to look at roads as we go forward, like the GPS and the electronic stuff that's going to be on that's the enhanced construction or enhanced opportunities that we can look at for roads. So I think we're already investing in that. So I think this does speak to that, you know, looking at good roads, but keeping our good roads good, but also looking at the roads that we can enhance down the road.
Okay, so maybe this wording is oh, sorry, who am I? Oh, agreeing. There was a thumbs up over there. Okay.
So why don't we move to the next goal around active transportation? So there's 2 here, and this is one of those goals where you're actually doing a lot. So it's more keep doing what you're doing, stay on that path. And, continue to goals are also important, especially because as part of the engagement, we heard a lot about active transportation in the community. So again, even though you're already doing these two things, we know it's a priority in the community. So by putting it in your strategy, you're sending that message. We heard you. We're going to keep moving forward with, transit expansion, and we're going to keep developing our active transportation network. Thoughts here? Okay. Wonderful. So let's move to the next pillar, which is a protected natural environment. So the statement for this pillar is, guided by our focus on climate stewardship, we work alongside our community to address climate change challenges and uphold Huntsville's natural beauty. The first goal is to safeguard and enhance the town's natural features. And the first initiative is to continue to apply best practices in maintaining our natural heritage features. Again, a continue to, because you're doing it already. Continue ongoing collaboration with the Muskoka Watershed Council on integrated watershed management, and investigate possibilities for developers to dedicate lands with natural features to either the town or the Muskoka Conservancy in new projects. And then there are other goals as well on the other slides. So we're just kind of looking at this one, but there are other goals around climate change, for example. Comments? Okay, so let's move to the other two, which are, the first goal is around what the town can do on climate change, so make the town a leader in climate action. The second goal here, number 3, one of 3, is to engage the community in addressing the impacts of climate change. So 2 different perspectives. One is what the town can do as an administration. The other is encouraging the community to adopt more sustainable practices or retrofits, that sort of thing. So the first one here, make the town a leader in climate action, to finalize the corporate climate change mitigation plan with Muskoka's area municipalities, to continue with implementation of the town's climate adaptation plan, and to work with partners such as Lakeland Power to develop an EV strategy for the town.
Thank you. If I may, I think we have to be very clear that these 2 goals, and I know we're just talking about number 2 right now, but the town is the community. We represent the people who are in this community. So I think they naturally speak to each other, because we should be the leader, because our constituents and our community are telling us where to go with this. So the fact that we're engaging our community, I guess my point is we're working with both, right?
And this first one's more intended about the things that you have direct control over. So moving to getting rid of paper, for example, or, green fleet strategy, LED lights in all town facilities. And the other one is often, in some cases, more challenging because, you can support the community in doing retrofits on their home, or looking at something like a heat pump, or telling them that there's federal programs via the town's website to make some of those retrofits. But at the same time, it's much broader, because it's not just you, it's everybody. So I think, but you're exactly right, that one of the ways to maybe support the town in adopting more sustainable practices is to lead by example first. If you do it first, maybe then they'll say, look at the great work our town is doing, what can we do as a community? So it's a great point that they're more interlinked than they look like on the page, for sure.
Just a point that number 3, work with partners like Lakeland to develop EV strategy. We may also want to implement in our own planning or building standards to have all new homes with level 2 chargers going forward. So it's not just with the partners, it's with us as well.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And it might have fallen under, but you're right, we've highlighted the one side, so I think that could be broadened for sure.
Well, and it is, sorry to interject, but if you look at 3.3 here, create green development standards
Right.
could help include some of that, where you're kind of pushing developers or other partners to also go greens. And in EV, having chargers could certainly be one of those things that you could build into there as well.
And I was about to say, I really like that number 3, engaged community, all of the points under that. But to your point, Councillor Stone, I really would like to see emphasis on what you said, that we need to pull that one and say, we've been talking about that for quite some time, and yet we still every month approve new subdivisions or building projects, and it's not, we don't ask the question. So I feel a bit like Councillor Morrison on this. How do we start asking the question rather than waiting for this, right? And so I'm glad you mentioned that. On the number 2, we say finalize the corporate climate change mitigation plan with Muskoka's area municipalities. What about implementation of that particular adaptation or mitigation plan? We mentioned the climate adaptation plan, but there will be an implementation piece to the other. Or,
Yep,
am I-
we can adjust the
Yeah,
verbs so that it's like
it's
complete
not
it, but
just-
then also do something with
Yeah,
it.
right. I think we've made a point of saying we're going to finalize it, but then
What happens
presumably,
after?
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and sorry, Jay.
Oh, thanks. I love the idea of EV strategy for developers. I think somewhere in that wording, we need to come up with a plan to incentivize it as well, because we can't make them borne all the costs. So how do we make it a favorable thing for them to do?
And that's what number 3 here that I've highlighted is trying to get at, but it's not EV specific. It could be other
Yep.
things. I mean, you could be stronger and just say, implement green develop, but staff still need to develop them and all of that. So you could have a harder verb here that's really where we are doing this, but you'd also need to understand that within that, all those sub-points, staff would actually need to create the policy first. So it's not like your next council meeting, you're going to be having a development come forward with those standards in place already. There's some upfront work that would need to happen.
Okay, all right. Any other comments? Jay, your light is on. Maybe you just want
I'm going to talk all day.
I know, and that's a good thing. That's much appreciated.
All right, so let's move to the next pillar, which is lively, health, and safe communities. Lively, healthy, and safe communities. So the pillar statement is, we support and advocate for the health and wellness needs of our community members and the vitality of our local businesses. So the first goal is to support improved access to local healthcare services and professionals. You may recall that this was the top issue and top priority identified in the community, among all others. That's why it has a goal here. So the first initiative is to continue to support the Muskoka and area Ontario Health Team for medical professional recruitment. Second is to continue to invest annually into the local hospital share until the required funding target is met. And the last is around advocacy, so advocating to the provincial government to support healthcare initiatives in Huntsville. So you've got medical professional recruitment, you've got your hospital, your local share, and you've got the advocacy.
So the nice thing is we're doing all of these initiatives. So I look at it and I think, great, okay, we're doing that. Is there anything we're missing that we could be doing, we should be doing? But I look at that and I think we're doing all of that in a very big way.
And this is a perfect example, Your Worship, of you're already doing it, doesn't need to be in your strat plan, but the community was very loud, so yes, it does. And these are, the local share is a significant investment, and it really does also, through the advocacy initiative, give you that license to really go and push on the province, you as council and your staff as well, that you're sending a message to the community that you're doing what you can within your role, but it's not entirely your responsibility as an area municipality.
I think the only thing we're missing a little emphasis on here is we haven't captured any mental health. And I think that's an important message to send. You know,
Yeah. Could be under support healthcare
can I just-
initiatives,
can I
but
just- Can I just leave this on?
it's fine by me. But Councillor Morrison wants to jump in.
I love that you're including that, because it's that and also like long-term care, which is a district thing, it's not our thing, but if there's focus on long-term care and mental health, the hospital is less overloaded because less people are going. I just don't know how we as a town help, like, we can support Mind Aid, we can support Canadian Mental Health Association. We're doing stuff, I mean, the OPP is bringing their MCER program. And I don't know, Sabine and Stacy, if you have experience with seeing what some towns are doing, because I love, obviously, to help mental health. How can we as a town help? I'm not sure, other than giving money, right?
Your CAO.
Yep, our CAO would like to jump in.
Thank you, Worship. So we did have that discussion when we met as a group, and that's why we stuck to medical professionals as opposed to doctors. So medical professionals would include, but if committee wants it to be a bit more detailed, I would defer to Stacy to add that in.
I think if it's
It
going to be a
might be
document
broader
that's going
than
out to
that,
the
right?
public,
Yeah.
I like Councillor Fitzgerald's idea of having it in there is good. So maybe like included but not limited to physicians, nurses, mental health care practitioners. something
So
like that.
maybe we could have something that speaks to more collaboration with agencies or whatever. We're kind of doing, right? But if it's right up there as an initiative, it supports anything we do in that regard. I think you're right, Scott, when you said, well, what is the role exactly?
Yeah.
Well, certainly ongoing support or collaboration with agencies that deliver, maybe there's another word other than agencies or something.
I think we have a role as an influencer or
Yeah.
a lobbyist, even to go that far, to have some input into how we get that care here, and whether it's in conjunction with the district, the province, the feds, whatever it is. I think it needs to be on our radar.
I think we can
Dan?
take
I think we just need something more broader that says that we support all healthcare needs and requirements in our area. So now we're not just centering out one or the other, we're covering everything.
Yeah, I agree.
I think
actually
that
with
was CA Corey's kind of point, but maybe more broad, like, so
Yeah,
keeping it
it's
as,
not just medical.
as practitioners is great, but then I like where you're going with it, just make it so it's a bit more broad. And some people don't realize too, you think of like Director Maxwell's comment earlier about the housing continuum. I mean, that is the biggest gap is the affordable. So when we do stuff there, it trickles down and does have an impact on addictions, mental health. Like people, instead of living in a tent, are now getting into the social housing that was bogged down with people that should have been moving on. So under the radar, we are doing stuff, but it's not easy to quantify, right? So I don't know, maybe be more clear. But I think
I like-
Deputy Mayor Armour's idea of
Yeah.
having it more broad like
More
that. so-
inclusive,
yeah.
right? It's-
Yeah.
I think if we drill down to the second point where it said advance the well-being of community and its evolving needs, there's an opportunity in the initiatives in that section to say that, like we support programming that advances equality, inclusion, diversity. Could we not put mental health in there or something that speaks to the mental wellness of our community? Because it is the well-being of our community and evolving needs. So, sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead, but that's it.
Okay. Sabine?
I was just going to make almost the same point. At the Ontario Nonprofit Housing Conference on the weekend, probably some folks may have been down there. The paradox that came up at the big plenary was, if you listen to healthcare professionals, they say the biggest problem they have that they'd like to see addressed is housing. And if you talk to housing professionals, they say the biggest problem is addictions and mental health. And if you talk to people in policing, they say, well, you know, it's mental health, addictions, and housing. And what just about every professional is finding is that we have silos that are organized like this, but we have people who have needs in the center who need to be served to some degree by each of these things, but typically they aren't. Now, oddly enough, sometimes you find great ideas in the most unexpected places, and the community safety and well-being plans came out of SolGen, which isn't where you usually go to expect really bright ideas about the integrated needs of things. But honestly, they did, right? And so everybody looks at community safety well-being plans and they either say, well, this is a terrible thing because it's another strategic plan that's underfunded, or they say it's a great thing because it's finally getting all the people across silo and across reporting relationship working. So what we might do is call out an explicit commitment on behalf of the town to be an active participant in the community safety and well-being process that led by the district. Because honestly, I do a CAO survey, I do a housing executive survey, and everybody says the same thing about these plans. They have great potential, but it's not fully realized. And by indicating a commitment to participate in it, then you get that full multidisciplinary table that forces cross-pillar collaboration and puts the needs of the individual at the center. So we could add a new initiative around participation in the community safety and well-being table that would get at it. Because EDI is sort of different again, but I think we could have a 7th initiative there.
I think that sounds, I really like that. I'm really supportive of that. I think there are general nods around the table. Okay.
Okay, we will do that. So since we're here, let's stay here. This one is around community well-being, advance the well-being of the community and its evolving needs. The first initiative is to continue to support the vibrancy of the arts and cultural community through partnerships, policies, and programming. The second is to support programming that advances diversity, equity, and inclusion. Then third is develop an implementation plan and financial strategy to advance the community services master plan. The next one is to continue to adapt and expand sports and recreation programming. The fifth, continue to support community events that foster a sense of belonging and engagement. The sixth, reinforce longstanding partnerships with volunteer groups and organizations. And then we'll add a 7th around partnering in the CSWB table, the district. So this one is intended to really be about community well-being in all of its facets, from, you know, DEI to arts and culture to community services, and then also sports and recreation is in here. How do we feel about this one? Your volunteer community's in here.
In previous years, we used to get some funding to actually go out and thank our volunteer groups and organizations. We actually had an event that recognized volunteers and organizations in the community. Do we still have that availability, or do we have anything in the works plan for that? I'm not aware of it, so.
The volunteer appreciation?
Yeah.
Well, we had talked about it, and
I think
Simone wants to jump in, yes, because I would really like to see that.
We do have one program that currently runs. It's the Community Recognition Program for organizations. And we are bringing forward in November a mirror program that is recognizing individuals. So that will be a whole multitude of things that shows appreciation, shows community benefit, and who those champions in our community are. And how they work, how other people can get involved with them, the good work that they do. It's a simple program, but it actually advocates for all the good work that our community helps us do and deliver.
Are we going to have the opportunity to have some input in that program around this table before it comes to fruition?
So it's a report coming in November. You certainly can. The existing community recognition program exists on our website for organizations, and we have a number of, they're recognized on a website with a link back to theirs. We have a wall of recognition, and we were proposing that maybe we add back that we report annually on who we've added to that, so that they could be celebrated at the community, at the council level. That piece will come with this new report.
That's good. Yes, I had hoped actually earlier that we would elevate it to council recognition and have some sort of ceremony or something around that, and especially with reference to individuals that have done all the great things. So that's great, Simone. Okay.
Other comments here for number 2?
I guess everybody's really happy about the develop a parking strategy for the downtown core.
So that's the next one, yeah. So on that one as well, that's about business, tourism, strengthening connections with local businesses and industrial leaders, continuing to work with your tourism partners, and then the parking strategy. So, one thing that's maybe not here is an initiative or a call out to the Indigenous communities. Is that Sabine noted?
And I think that's important. We actually have been working really well with one of the only local
Yep.
Hope Arises, and we have done cultural training, but I like to think that it's an ongoing relationship, and we're growing. It's evolving all the time. And we're certainly engaged with the Muskoka and Area Leaders Table, Indigenous Leaders Table. So that's also, we do that regularly. But I think you're right, absolutely. We should have a placeholder there for sure about an ongoing relationship.
Yes.
Does that not include sort of inclusivity and diversity? Would it be underneath that aspect as well? I mean, we could name it specifically, but I think equity, inclusion, and diversity does encompass some of the Indigenous needs. And number 2, yeah.
Typically, it is separated.
Yeah.
To recognize. Yeah. Sure. And so I think
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we should.
we'll add for that.
That'd be great.
It's important as a communications and, letting people know what your priorities are to continue to grow that relationship. You're already doing it, so let's add it. So why don't we move to the last pillar, which is more of the internal facing pillar, the administration. So it's stable, trusted, and engaged community partner. And the kind of pillar statement, we enable our staff to deliver exceptional services, safeguard our financial health, and deepen connections with community members. The first goal is around building organizational capacity and supporting staff engagement and wellness. First initiative, align organizational capacity to service delivery needs. In other words, make sure that you have the people you need to deliver the services and the service levels you've committed to. The second initiative is to implement and invest in the corporate human resources strategic plan, which will support attraction and recruitment, policy development, make sure that you continue to be a sought-after employer. And the last, of course, related to that, support opportunities to be an employer of choice in the region.
Implement, invest in corporate human resources strategic plans. So I like this. We seem to only attack this on a yearly budgetary level. And I think we haven't done our human capital justice in coming up with a longer term plan and what does our community need in 5 years or 10 years for even short-term succession planning, long-term. Is there going to be new requirements?
I think they're working on a plan, I believe. It's coming, right?
Yeah.
And I hear what you're saying. The only thing is I would kind of, that is in the purview of the CAO, right? Working with I hate the thought of how much detail the council should be involved in.
I feel this is our opportunity to direct them.
To direct them.
Especially in this
Yeah.
category.
Gotcha.
And I
Yeah.
don't feel that I need input on it.
But you're just saying, here's the strength, that we encourage you to do this.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And CAO Corey, is that's exactly, okay. Listen, all right, Councillor Clark.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I look at this page as more of a foundation really than a pillar, because if we don't do the things well on this page, really everything else that came before won't be done well either. So I look at these items as really our foundation to build on. I just thought that while I was reading through it.
Couldn't be more right. We see this in a lot of places because if you don't have the people, the funds, or the tools / resources, within the administration, then you actually can't do any of the things on the other slides. Like
Right.
they're integral. These are what we might even call the enablers or the levers that allow you to do everything else. And so it's really important. And I'd say, you know, when Sabine and I have done this in the past, even 5 years ago, you didn't necessarily have this pillar because it was considered to be a community-based strategic plan focused on community priorities. But in the over the last couple of years, with the current challenge around workforce development in the municipal sector, with increasing financial pressures placed upon municipalities, with challenges around communicating, educating, and engaging community members, these kinds of elements have become all the more important, and it's actually thought, no, we don't need the corporate plan. It should just be the insider baseball corporate plan that talks about this stuff. It needs to be external. We need to really communicate to the community as well that we need to do things on the inside to make sure that we can serve the outside.
Which is why it's a pillar.
Yep.
Right, I guess. I agree with you, Councillor Clark, it is foundational. But I guess the fact that it's a pillar, it's one way to communicate that point.
And we can be quite clever even in terms of how we design the strategic plan, that instead of having it look like this, which is four, and you know, it does speak against, this kind of structure does speak against a lot of what we've talked about, which is these are integrated pillars, right? The housing is tied into well-being. But just from an organizational standpoint, having numbers and having ways of grouping things can be helpful as staff think about how to implement, creating spreadsheets, using software and things like that. But one option to consider would be to really hammer home that this fourth pillar is foundational, would be to turn it on its side and it undercuts everything.
I think that makes, just personally, I think that makes sense. It's sort of, Sabine.
I'd just add, Stacey and I had the great pleasure of working on the City of Toronto's long-term financial plan. And if there was any one message of warning that came out of that, it was the idea that just because a budget is balanced in terms of money in, money out, it doesn't mean that it's sustainable in terms of investments. And if all you're doing is pushing things forward, you know, the way a snowplow pushes snow forward, sooner or later you get a very big mountain of snow. And Toronto's is $46.5 billion just right now. And I think one of the things that the public often doesn't appreciate when they see that a budget is balanced is that all the pressure to keep taxes down is all very understandable, and we always have to spend every dollar as if it's, critical to get the best value for money out of it. But deferring stuff isn't actually in the interest of the taxpayer either now or later, because it just catches up. And I think the point that was made earlier about the best way to look after roads is to keep the good ones good. And if you make an alternate choice, it just is so much more expensive to fix something that's run down. And so the other important piece about strategy as you come into this is, sometimes, in high inflationary times or in times when it feels like you have relatively high tax increases, whether you want to point to it as a foundation or whether you want to point to it as a pillar, it makes it a lot easier for the public to understand council making investments in sustainability of staffing plans. And, you can say, beatings will continue until morale improves, and we're going to set our HR benchmark at the 10th percentile of competitiveness, and you can also watch all your best people walk out the door. And that is not good strategy. It's penny wise and pound foolish. And so I think the important point about this pillar is whether you want to frame it as a foundation thing or a pillar, the reason why it has to be here is because it's an essential enabler and it has to be attended to at budget time. And, it's interesting. We're always calling out the things that aren't here. Some places you go, you see them call out IT specifically. Those are often places that have recently suffered a cybersecurity raid. I think here it's meant to be included under the overall asset management and long-term, like the taking care of business. But IT could sometimes be called out here. You've certainly looked after people, the money that pays for stuff. You've looked after the ability to communicate, and you've looked after the assets. So, you know, IT is sometimes the fifth thing that gets called out here.
I sort of like the idea of including IT. I mean, it's one, it fits with the direction that we've supported, increasing efforts around that, but I think the reference to security, it's becoming such a huge issue that recognizing the importance of IT in helping with that, it may be a good thing, I don't know. Dan?
Thank you, Worship. I attended the InfoSec last Tuesday at Deerhurst, the conference, and I listened to a couple of keynote speakers, and it was quite interesting to hear about these cyber attacks and the thousands and thousands of dollars of ransom that towns are paying out that with one click of a mouse. So yeah, I think it's very important that we mention it somehow.
We'll make that addition. Other comments on this goal? You've got under financial sustainability, create, implement, and invest in the town's asset management plan. Sometimes you don't need to have this in there, but a lot of municipalities, because you have to have an asset management plan, but this will allow you to set the direction of that gas pedal right through the budget. How much? Maybe you need to do more, and we've talked about that in this plan. So sending it here is also just a really good reminder around budget time. Oh, we put the asset management plan in our strategic plan. This is clearly a priority for us, so we need to think about that when we look at everything else as part of the budget.
Do you think it would be something to say that we've continued implementation of the town's community strategy, or communication strategy? Because it sounds like that we're just starting it, as opposed to saying that it's an ongoing. We want our communications to be forefront and be vibrant, but this sounds like we're implementing it for the first time, as opposed to an ongoing implementation of the town strategy.
I see what you're saying. We just did approve it, so maybe that's
why,
you
yeah.
know.
Okay.
But I hear you. No. It's kind of nice to see it there, though, because I think as we've talked about so many times, communication is so vital to everything we do, and yeah.
So we've worked through the whole framework now, and as I said, and as predicted, it's a little slow up front with the biggest ones around balanced growth, right? Because that is the issue of the day and one of the most critical in the community. But then it moves fairly quickly after that. So I'm going to suggest that we take a brief 10-minute break, and then we can come back, and we're going to look again at the vision, mission, and values. Now that we've seen the framework and we have a sense of the nuts and bolts, let's revisit those higher level pieces to see, where and if we need to make changes. So let's take a break.
Great. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are still working on our new council strategic plan, and I think we had a healthy discussion this morning. And if I can turn it back over to you, Stacy and Sabine.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. Stacy, if we could jump back to, yeah, that's a good slide. So what I did was, just over the break, modeled what it would look like if we turned the fourth pillar into a foundation layer. And the reason for just taking a quick look at it is, you'd say, if somebody asked you, what are you going to do over the term? Well, there's really three things we're going to do. We're going to focus on balanced growth, and we're going to protect the natural environment, and we're going to make sure that we've got a lively, healthy, and safe community. And, you know, key to doing that, we got to make sure that we're a stable, trusted, and engaged community partner, and that means we're going to have to look after the staff and the finances and our ability to communicate. And that would literally be your 1-minute elevator pitch. And so then the mayor's 18-year-old skeptic would, mine's 22 years old now, so I know about it exactly. So, well, what are you doing on balanced growth? Well, we're going to embrace, forward thinking and sustainable planning, and we're committed to preserving our distinct character, but we're going to encourage vibrant and connected communities. And you see, it's interesting, I'm having a bit of a hard time talking like a human being while reading it, which might mean that we want to edit a little bit to hit more of a human tone. But it's certainly formally appropriate, but a human being probably wouldn't say that unless they were very, very formalistic. And what are you going to do on the natural environment? Well, we're going to focus on climate stewardship, but we're going to actually work with the community, we're going to engage the community, and we're also going to really uphold Huntsville's natural beauty. Now, it's interesting because an environmentalist probably wouldn't talk about the natural beauty, they'd probably talk about, the natural, ecosystem or whatever. So we could think about how we want to tweak that so that it hits whether you want to call it a different authenticity, because certainly there's a beauty to Huntsville that anybody can see. But the other authenticity would be to sort of sound more like an environmentalist when we're doing it. And when we were talking about the lively, healthy, and safe communities, we're supporting and advocating for the health and wellness of the needs of our community members and the vitality of our local businesses. Again, that might not be fully capturing the recreational sides of things, but so when we bring these back to you, we could tweak them a little bit. But the importance of them is this: everything in a strategic plan is supposed to be useful. So if you really just have 30 seconds in the elevator, then it's balanced growth, protect the environment, lively, healthy and safe communities, and the stable, trusted, engaged partner. If somebody says, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? You've got a summary statement for each, and they say, okay, yeah, but I could drive a truck through that. What are you actually going to do? Well, let me tell you. And then you start whipping through the pages, and it's great because you have, and this is what we call building the bridge between the high-level observations and then the specifics. So when we get to the vision and mission, this is the attempt to take it and put an even finer point on it. So just the first observation is the mission tends to be, these are terms of art. And so they're going to sound like, well, the mission, how's that different from the vision? Well, in strategic planning land, the mission is what's our day-to-day purpose? What do we do every day? And so often the best way to do it is to sort of imagine you've just started off by saying, every day we come to the office and we blank. And the vision is more, hey, and I'll say in 5 years, where do we want to be as a place? But, it's actually kind of neat, because if you can say it as in 20 years, where do we want to be as a place? And in 5 years, where do we want to be as a place? And it's sort of interesting because sometimes what you choose as a language works for both. Sometimes it's way more 5 years. So if you go to a place, I was doing some work in a northern community that was having a lot of trouble. They'd had the plant closure, and it was a disaster in a lot of ways. And so in 5 years, they wanted to be stable. They couldn't possibly talk about where they wanted to be in 20 years, because all they could really do was think about where they wanted to be when they got to the end of the bad movie they were in now. You know, you're not in that situation. So I think in your case, it might be interesting to sort of do the cross-check of, well, I don't know, is that where we want to be in 4 or is that where we want to be in 20? But you see, people always say to me, okay, you do these strategic plans all over the province, and more or less, you're dealing with the same municipal act, the same sets of problems, the same macroeconomic issues. Why aren't they all the same? You know, how do you guard yourself against having something that's sort of stupid because it could apply to anywhere? And the answer I generally give is because as much as we all deal with the same municipal act and we all have the same broad sets of challenges, every place has got something unique and authentic about it, which you know you hit when you get there, but you never get it in the first draft. And oftentimes it comes out because of something that somebody blurts out at the council table, and everybody says, yeah, that's it. And the funny thing is you never quite know when you're going to get there until you get there, and it happens in the most unguarded of moments. The values, that's the third piece. And those are what are the underlying values that guide the organization. And one of the handy things about the values is, you know, our ability to value the taxpayer dollar, or our ability to value the individual, or value all these other sort of things, you know, teamwork and that. It's very handy to be able to put them in the bucket called values, because it means you don't have to put them in the operational, or the more operational aspects of the strategic plan. And so that's the third part. And honestly, those values are the ones that it is getting increasingly tough to find much difference in values from municipality to municipality, because honestly, who is opposed to transparency? Who is opposed to a lot of that stuff really does transcend, and that's where you don't necessarily expect, you know, you guys to have found a particular value that nobody else has found. You know, if you did, it might be dodgy. You know, we value the sense of competition among staff that we get from embracing the values of the Hunger Games is not something I think you'd want to emulate, right? So that sort of explains the relationship between the three parts. But I do want to emphasize that the vision is the one where you really want to nail the essence of Gravenhurst. So your current vision, about 7 of 13 of council and 11 of 66 of staff said that it didn't really still resonate with them. Some of the comments we got on it, and I take this one personally myself, long-winded. You say that like it's a bad thing, but you know, long-winded, confusing, not aspirational, doesn't focus on preserving Huntsville's small town feel. Those were some of the criticisms of the current vision, which you see printed there: a vibrant, inclusive, healthy community which inspires innovation and growth, celebrates the arts, culture, and heritage, promotes recreation, while developing a resilient economy founded on social caring and environmental stewardship. Now, that vision would be a lot more appropriate if it was read with the old voice that the guy in the KTEL ads used to have when he was talking about greatest hits of the 1970s, a vibrant, inclusive, healthy community which inspires innovative and growth. Like that probably isn't authentic to Huntsville. I'm guessing that doesn't nail the essence of Huntsville for you. And so we're going to suggest some changes to that one to get you going, but I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do better than what we've got now as a draft. And then on the current mission, now this is interesting because it was providing superior and sustainable services for the people of Huntsville. And it's interesting because superior suggests, well, we're going to do stuff that's a little bit better. You know, in a GTA context, North York always said their services were better than everybody else. And so like they had the leaf blower elephant nose truck that would come along and pick up the leaves, and you didn't have to shovel your windrows because some guy on a little bobcat would come along and get them. In Etobicoke, we had to do all that ourselves. But so that was what, you know, what superior might conjure. And I don't know if that makes sense in a time when, just to keep the lights on, you're at 8 or 10% tax increases this year. So Superior is a word to really think about. You know, if we were in California and we were talking to Mayor Eastwood in Carmel a few years ago, I bet they had superior services. And so it's a nice question as to whether you want that. Sustainable, and it's interesting, sustainable is a challenging word because it either means fiscally sustainable or it means environmentally sustainable or it means both, and sometimes those are two very different things. But it clearly had a focus on for the people. Now, I think there's somebody else who used that for the people slogan, but this is for the people of Huntsville. So anyway, that's where we're sitting, and I think what we heard was in the feedback, neither are optimized at the moment. One of the things I like to do is actually do a sort of both bottom-up and top-down look at it. And so actually, Stacey, if you can just jump to 21. You guys have just spent a lot of time thinking about your pillars. And so if you go bottom-up from your pillars and try and turn the vision into a kind of thing that makes sure it hits on the things that you said were your three pillars. If it's about balancing growth with protecting of environment and probably small town feel and lively, healthy, and safe community, then that might be one way of thinking about we're trying to capture the balance point of those three things. The fourth one, which is now the foundation layer, that might actually help inform the mission, because the mission's what we do every day, and that's probably more about being stable, trusted, and engaged. So, but that's just a way of thinking about it. Some people go with very slogan-y visions. What's the one that place which shall not be named that's south of, what was it? What was it? Balanced, it was balanced first, future next, community always or something. It sounded very much almost like the same people who do advertising for Apple or something did it. Like it was really like cool. It was really cool. It was like a series of couplets or like two words. One, a two-word period, two-word period, two-word period. Like it was cool. What it was not was the Harvey Keitel greatest hits of all the positive words from the 1970s, all put together in one very lengthy one-on sentence. So, and actually, I'm glad that you're laughing because you have to approach this task with some humor, right? Because you're trying to do the impossible. You're trying to summarize a place as interesting as Huntsville in one sentence, which is like, it's a bit daffy to try to do it, and yet we do it because it, oddly enough, it seems to work. So if we jump back up one slide, here it is from a point of view of, well, let's start, it's like, let's take apart the engine, let's take a look at all the parts we have, and let's throw out the ones we don't like. That's another way to do it. This is sort of top down as opposed to bottom up. So in the current one, it starts with vibrant, inclusive, healthy. And so in the feedback that we got from the survey, nobody was opposed to vibrant, inclusive, or healthy. I'm not sure how uniquely those are attributes of Huntsville, but they're certainly not bad, which inspires innovation and growth. So as to how innovative you are, good question. You're certainly growing. Celebrating arts, culture, heritage, and promoting recreation. That struck us as being probably a little bit of a laundry list of operational kind of stuff. And yet, you definitely had the growing but preserving kind of thing, that duality. While developing a resilient economy founded on social caring, environmental stewardship, that certainly had the safeguarding of natural features. And so the other thing is, while you can cross-check and see, like this is entitled to be read with the pillars, but it's really great if you can get the sense of the place if you don't have the pillars handy. Like, it'd be kind of cool if it were just one thing on the bottom of a piece of letterhead or something, or just one thing, you know. If you all decided you wanted to get tattoos and have it here on your arm, you know, something like that. So what we came up with as a draft, if we jump back down to 21, was a growing community, because to say that we are growing as opposed to not growing is important to acknowledge. That is vibrant, inclusive, and healthy, while safeguarding its or our unique heritage and natural features. That's kind of trying to capture the balance between, yes, growth, but protecting what's important, delivering stuff for the people. I don't know that that's Huntsville enough, but it is at least trying to twist together the three wires of balanced growth, protected natural environment, and lively, healthy, and safe. So it's not wrong, but it certainly isn't future, next, cool, always kind of stuff, right? Like, and it's not really aspirational or inspirational. So I'm not sure that it's lifting it off the page. But at the very least, it's not inconsistent with all the work that you've done up to now. And so what I do is, with that bucket of ideas dumped on the table, and encouraging people to sort of be a little bit free in their thinking. I mean, if you were to say, what is it you're really trying to achieve, or where do you really want the place to be in 5 years or 10 years? That's really the question you're trying to sum up. Recognizing that it will sit on the foundation of your pillars and of your new foundation layer, so it can be elaborated by these other things.
So just looking at it and thinking about this revised, and I like it, and I like ours instead of its, but I'm going to question unique heritage. What is that? Are we different? What is our heritage? Yes, we've had people trying to survive here in Muskoka for 150 years, much like every other rural town. So do we need that, and what is it?
So I know that when what we were trying to capture was the idea of the small town feel, and there's certainly lots of places that have that same feeling. I mean, it's funny, I think at some point you get far enough east in the province that people stop comparing themselves to, well, we don't want to wake up as Brampton, and they start saying we don't want to wake up as Barrhaven, which I gather is the Brampton of Ottawa. And it's not to say there's anything bad about Brampton or Barrhaven, but it's just not what a small town wants to wake up as a industrial subdivision to a great, to a city. They want to maintain a sense of a town with a center, and of course that's just challenging when growth is coming. And so that strikes me as being the role that plays. And so what's unique about your heritage there is unique about whatever it is that's special about Huntsville, not just in the summer, but in the winter. Whether that's a combination of architecture and just the sense of the place, that might be your unique heritage, but it could be that it's too universally applicable to be good enough for Huntsville in 2023.
Interesting. I enjoyed that, actually, the back and forth on that, because it made me think. I kind of agreed with you, Bob, when you mentioned it. And then I think, yeah, if we all sat around the table, we could figure out what is unique to Huntsville versus other municipalities in Muskoka. And I suspect we could come up with a number of things that are definitely unique to us. And so if we had to do that, we could probably fill that in. And so I like Sabine's response to that. I think it's important enough to say what's our unique heritage, right? I think. Scott?
I tell you, I like this a whole lot better than Earldwood for sure, but I'm kind of with Councillor Stone. I think no matter what we find, it wouldn't be unique to only us. And I wonder, would a word more like our valued heritage or our something as it, or does it really matter? You know, at the end of the day, I don't know, but I've read that like the public won't understand our intention behind it. And so I'm kind of on board with Councillor Stone. Is there a different type of wording? Otherwise, I love it. I think it's great. It flows well. It really hits what I care about for our town. But that's the only word that I would look at maybe altering a little bit. But
And
it's also good the way it is. So.
do you even need it? Is one thing like if you were to take out unique and make this submission our heritage, or the suggestion that you had said, Councillor Stone, our instead of it's, like you're already saying it's our heritage. It's not just anyone's, it's ours.
Yeah, thanks. I was just thinking about the sign that we've got as you come into Huntsville, and I always screw it up when I try to remember what it says. Exactly, but, you know, a lot of the stuff on the sign kind of addresses the stuff that you see in front of you. I mean, we all realize that whether we want to grow or not, it's happening. So the growth is about doing it right, doing it smart, while protecting and remembering our past and our heritage, right? So at the same time, embracing the future. So I kind of like a lot of the stuff a lot of the stuff on that sign speaks to a lot of the stuff you see here, right? Just thinking about it.
I like your idea of dropping the unique, because I think it is our heritage, right? And I think this kind of embraces a little bit of what our slogan is, that touch the past and embrace the future. I quite like it. No, Helena's making a goofy look.
So I'm thinking perhaps a different adjective, but I like our heritage, but I don't want it to be our heritage without excluding, or with excluding any Indigenous heritage as well. Like, is that our heritage from 150 years ago, or are we talking about the natural beauty of our community that was based on, you know, thousands of generations of people being here? So I think we have to be careful with, is it our heritage, or is it I guess the natural features would talk about, you know, the fact that it's been around for so long, but I don't know what I'm saying right now.
That's important. That's good. In response to that, I think, I hear what you're saying, but the way I would interpret it is saying our heritage, well, that's our heritage. Like, because who we are, what we are today is everything that we've come from, right? We're getting better at recognizing it. We haven't always recognized that. So maybe to that point, hopefully we do a better job at recognizing what our heritage is.
Right. Well, I would agree with that. If it's more encompassing that it's our heritage, which it is.
Yeah.
I would be comfortable with that. Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask about the word safeguarding? Is safeguarding inspirational enough? I mean, the Ontario Association of Asset Managers probably thinks it's safe. I'm not sure they have an association, but you know what I mean? You see, what's really cool, and I was so glad that Councillor Clark mentioned touch the past, embrace the future, because if you were to say, listen, where do we want to be in 5 years? Huntsville is a place that has, we want to be a place that preserves what's great about what we are while growing into who we can become, right? Like and I'm not sure that safeguarding our heritage is confident enough. It sounds more like you're worried as opposed to.
So going back to Corey's comment, what about embracing? Because that
Or
is.
remembering.
Or remembering.
Or celebrating.
I like embracing. because it speaks to that, embracing the future or the past.
The only
Yeah, it is
question
part of our
there
slogan.
is, can you embrace, so I think you can embrace our heritage, but does it work with natural features as well?
I'd flip it. It could be embrace the growth, because it's touch the past and embrace the future. So we could probably reverse it. It'd be, we'd be, I don't want to say rooted, but we'd be founded in our heritage, but embracing our growth or something.
So if I could, safeguarding is what we want to do. We want to, at least for the next 5 years, we want to make sure we hang on to our small town feel, and that's what I hear from people all the time. And we want to safeguard our natural features, which is what we love and why people visit and live here. So we need to protect those and safeguard them.
Yep, and I concur with you, Councillor Stone, for
So
sure.
safeguards okay?
Well, I agree with the sentiment. I do hear that all the time as well, that, you know, what are you guys doing about unchecked growth? And we're losing our downtown. It's turning into Niagara on the Lake. That's sort of a refrain that I certainly hear.
Could you say the word protecting instead of safeguarding? I don't know. Because embracing, I mean, you can embrace someone, but are you really protecting them, you know? I don't know.
What's the difference between protecting and safeguarding? If someone protects you as opposed to safeguarding, is it just is it? But I think to what Sabine had said, like, is this a, you know, not a sexy word, but is it something that really grabs you when you read that? It's like safeguarding is with assets and la la, you know, I shouldn't say la la, but I mean, just, is it the word that we want to use? I mean, this is our, you know, this is our vision. Right. So.
It's like a thesaurus of preserving, but then some people say that kind of sounds like mummies and mummification. So protecting, safeguarding.
What we could do is try and flip it on it. I'll tell you what, the great thing about live TV is responding to the circumstances at hand. Why don't you take them into the mission?
Yep.
And I'll see if I can come up with a couple of swatches that maybe reverse the order, and then we can maybe decide based on a couple of different ideas.
So for the mission, so it was provide superior and sustainable services for the people of Huntsville. A revised mission based on the input provided. It does lengthen it, but strive to deliver high-quality services for the people of Huntsville through visionary leadership and responsible decision-making. Looks like this on a page. How do we feel about this? There were questions, you know, in the feedback that we received about the words superior and sustainable.
For me, I find strive something that says it's okay to fail. Because you're striving for something, you may not get there, but it's okay that you didn't. So, yeah. I strive all the time, so.
What about reverting? Because when I saw this too, I had that feeling as well, right? But what about reverting? You had providing as the verb earlier, like just jump right into it, right? Like providing and then high quality as opposed to superior. That way you're still providing great services, but superior isn't maybe overselling it in the current climate.
Or what about just deliver? Like, deliver high-quality services to the people of Huntsville?
Yep, we can do that too. How do we feel about that? What about the other pieces here?
Visionary leadership?
Visionary leadership.
Wow. We can hope.
I mean, remember, this isn't the vision, so it's not, you don't have to be visionary. It's the mission, so you could just as easily just, you know, this isn't the aspirational statement. But if you're already feel like you guys are visionary leaders, which is hard to, how you can answer no, but you know, you could include that, but you could just as easily be like, our job is to deliver high-quality services for the people of Huntsville through responsible decision-making. Like, that's what you do. This isn't the branding. We're not getting tattoos of this one. This is, you know, but this is what you do. Okay?
Could our staff, could our staff also get on board with this, Madam CAO? Yeah? You guys okay with that?
Oh, Reva.
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump in here. I absolutely think that this mission provides staff with a good, you know, day-to-day operations. This is what we're striving to do. I know, sorry, at the last workshop, we talked about the changing of superior to something a little bit more realistic, right? So I agree. We always strive to offer high-quality services and deliver high-quality services, but is that setting us up for failure based on resourcing? So I wonder if it's more of a delivering affordable or delivering, you know, necessary services to the town of Huntsville or something along those lines. I don't want, I just don't want us to have a mission that's setting us up for failure, because we do need to recognize, and that part of that base is that we need to make sure that the organization has the right resources to be able to provide those services and those service levels that we're committing to.
So
Just a
you're
thought.
assuming, I think the input's great. So you're assuming if we take out strive, that we're not recognizing that if we just say deliver, and we hope that in that statement, that
That's the thing. I think that town staff do deliver
right.
great services for the community. I'm worried about the high quality based on the resources that we have and everything. Like we strive to provide high quality services, right? So if we were saying deliver high quality services, are we setting ourselves up for failure there?
Well, maybe we have a disclaimer in small print underneath saying within our resources.
With the
Subject to the budget.
Well,
subject to budget approval.
but you know what? If you look at that further and say the responsible decision-making,
Yeah, absolutely.
that speaks to that, right?
Yep,
If
that's a
we
very
don't
good point.
have responsible decision-making, which speaks to your point about, well, if we haven't staffed it correctly, then we won't be able to deliver. But then if we haven't, then we probably haven't had responsible decision-making.
Yep.
That's maybe how I would capture that, because I really, and I appreciate the point, but I also appreciate the point about the strive to. It seems a bit like, well, we really try, but sometimes we're actually not going to get there. And that sounds defeatist to me.
Yeah.
So, but I appreciate your point, Reva, and I would think that, I would hope that through the responsible decision-making, that would capture that point. So it's on us to say our decisions better reflect that input, right? That's how I'd see that. But any other, yeah, Corey.
Thanks. Yeah, I totally appreciate Reva's comments, because one thing I find with a lot of the calls and emails I get is that the expectations are very high from the public. A lot of these folks have moved from other places where services, it's from cities mostly they've moved from, so the service levels may be higher than, in some cases, than what we're able to provide in a small community. So when they get here, their expectations are so high that we fall short just because of the nature of being a rural community, right? So I totally appreciate Reva's comments. I think they're right on. Is it a simple thing as just saying we provide quality services, you know, rather than saying high quality, or, you know, I mean, is it that simple? I mean, we do. our staff do the very best they can to provide quality services. And I think that might be an easy way to look at it. And just as a sidebar, I'm glad to see the visionary parts out. I don't wake up many days and feel like a visionary myself, if I'm being completely honest. So.
Okay, I'm not sure where to go with that. Okay, except that, okay. So you've just put that back on the table about either you just go with quality services, or do we consider strive or another word for strive or something? Because it's a good point, clearly. Reva wants the word back. No, sorry.
Sorry, I actually really loved Councillor Clark's suggestion
So
of
just
just
saying
removing
quality.
high quality, right?
So
And just
quality.
say quality, because we do
Okay.
provide quality services.
Okay,
We really do.
okay.
About, I was just gonna say, what about delivering quality services for the people of Huntsville through responsible decision-making?
Yeah. Okay. It does sound a bit bland, but okay.
It
But-
sounds very vanilla, very boring.
But it is the
Like,
mission.
we're not striving for anything now. Like, we're
We're
just,
not
this is
striving,
what we do. And
Nor are we visionaries. We're,
no, none of us are
we're just
visionaries around this table.
recognizing,
Yeah.
that we
I mean,
just
it-
want to get the job done.
Basically. And there's nothing wrong
Wrong
with
with
getting the
that.
job done, but I
No,
think a
that's
little
true.
bit of spice or something in there just to say, and I don't know, like high quality, we do, maybe we're getting back to strive, I don't know.
I just would say there's a difference between your mission statement and a vision statement. I think the sexy
Right.
is maybe in the vision statement.
Yes.
Right,
Where a mission statement is, let's get it done.
yep.
You're vanilla, right?
So Stacy and Sabine, what do you think? That probably makes sense,
Yeah,
right?
This is what you do. This is not supposed to be that aspirational
Right.
message.
Okay.
That's for what you want to become. This is what you do now, which
Okay.
I think is why some of your staff don't want to overcommit because, they're setting them up for a bit of a challenge.
Troublemaker back there. Okay, no, that's great. All right, so we're removing high, we're just deliver quality.
Feel okay about quality services?
Yep. Everybody nod around the, yes. Denise?
I think it's great, and I think sometimes we overuse this word, but it really does sort of fit, which is sustainable, which is able to maintain at a certain rate or level. So is it delivering sustainable services for the people of Huntsville? And I do sometimes think we overuse that word. That's why I'm cautionary about saying it, but I just want to throw it out there. Quality is great, but realistically, we can only provide the services that we can maintain at a certain level.
Corey?
I think sustainable sounds like we're gonna try the best we can, but we're probably not gonna get there.
Yeah, no,
Right?
and that was my reaction as well. I thought, okay, now we're just barely making it. We're barely getting it. We're hoping to, but I appreciate the comment. But I agree that you captured it beautifully, Corey.
You can add good luck at the end.
Okay,
Odds ever in your favor.
so
We're really lowballing
I
here.
think we have some options now for mission. So if we feel generally okay about this, and it's not the world's sexiest visionary statement, but you're delivering the services that residents need and rely on every day. That's a pretty lofty mission in and of itself. The words may be a bit vanilla, but what you're doing is still really important. So let's move to the vision, where again, you get more opportunities to be sexy or spicy, and this is what this is what you're selling. Let me find where Sabine is.
And nothing says sexy like a bunch of visions by Sabine, so here you go. So I've got 3 main options with 2 of them that have A's and B's. So I'll start with the third one because that's where we were before. There's 3A and 3B, which is a growing community that is vibrant, inclusive, and healthy while protecting our heritage and natural features. A little awkward, but it's meaningful. And B is just, instead of protecting, sub out protecting for safeguarding. So then trying to sort of riff off of the touch the past, embrace the future. And by the way, touch the past and embrace the future is pretty good. So again, answering the question, what are you going to be in 5 years? We'll be a town that's true to our roots as we embrace growth. So true to our roots, well, what roots are those? Well, it's our culture, it's our heritage, it's our small town feel. What part of our roots don't you understand? Aren't you one of us? You know, and I think that can be a broadly inclusive one of us. So then we grow with a purpose and we sustain and preserve the things that matter. Or there's a shorter version, we grow with a purpose and we preserve the things that matter. Well, what matters? Well, the environment, the small town feel, the heritage. Why are you growing? Well, we're growing to achieve something. We're not growing because we had to respond to an application from a proponent. We're growing with a purpose. What's the purpose? It's to achieve the vision of the place. And what's the vision of the place? We'll look at our pillars. So you know, those are more slogan-y, but they at least capture the duality, and they're trying to sort of riff off two different ideas. True to the past while embracing growth, but also this sort of like, you know, they talk about profit with a purpose. I think municipalities can talk about growth with a purpose or evolution with a purpose as opposed to undirected growth. And you know, municipalities are often rich in master plans. You guys are no exception. Every one of those has underlying it a purpose. So we're not just doing a series of random acts of approving things. We're trying to get to a place. So anyway, there's a couple of different ideas. Do any of them
I
feel
still like 3.
Yeah.
A or B is fine with me, but
I quite like 3A still.
Yeah.
I think it's succinct and kind of does the same thing. Although I love the explanation on the others. But I think that explanation works with 3A too, right? It's just a bit more wordy. It's just my view. I kind of like, I certainly like the intent.
Well, you know, you've already got touch the past, embrace the future. You don't need another thing that's kind of like it.
Yeah, right. So for me anyway, 3A.
This side of the room? 3A, okay. Councillor Clark.
I like 3A, but I also like, I like the statement of, where is it? I can't really read it. Preserving the things that matter.
I like
I
that
think
too.
that's an important statement because we know based on a lot of the feedback that you guys got from I don't know, what do you call them? The public things where you got feedback and public input surveys, that was a very important thing to protect small town, as Bob was saying, and as we develop. So I would be okay with 3A if we could put something in there about preservation.
How about this? How about we combine, so while instead of protecting our heritage and natural features, how about while preserving the things that matter?
I like that. That's really cool.
It's simple.
Yep.
It's understandable. It speaks to what our feedback was from the open houses and public input, and it's all encompassing, really, isn't it?
So can I delete one? I just did.
Elena had to jump in. Yep.
I like those top 3. I just think they are, and I think to what Sabine said, we do already have touch the past, embrace the future, and if we're going to stay with that, but I think 1 and 2A speak to that, but I like what they say. We grow with purpose and we sustain and preserve the things that matter. I guess number 3 is just, it adds more detail to it, you know, inclusive and healthy. So if Sabine can bring something else to that.
things that matter are it's very subjective. Because
exactly.
things that matter to you aren't
Yeah.
the same as
Right.
what matter to me, but we want to protect the small town feel and our natural environment. We all agree on that. I think.
And when we're around this table, I think we all get, to your point, Bob, we all get the things that matter. We're in that frame mindset. But that's what I was sort of thinking, that out there, that some skeptics might say, well, what is that? Things that matter to me, you don't listen to what matters to me, right? I'm just being cynical, and I apologize, but that's why I like a little more definition of the statement. But I certainly love the simplicity of the things that matter.
Could you simply put it at the end of number 3, in order to preserve the things that matter to the people of Huntsville, or in order to preserve the things we value? Just at the end? Or are we overthinking it and no one's really going to care? Like,
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. These things can be used to help sum up complex debates. You can say, look, council, yes, this application is before us and we're trying to grow, but we said we were going to do it in a way that preserves the things that matter. And clearly this is one of the things that matter. But then you get into, and does supply of another 647 new affordable units matter, or does preserving that oak tree matter? So it doesn't necessarily help you solve anything. All it does is provide a frame within which decisions have to be made. Protecting heritage and natural features is more directive. There's no question about it.
I think sometimes we can overthink it as well. I think I would have to agree with number 3, that you specifically say, protecting our heritage and our natural features. It's succinct. It doesn't leave any ambiguity. We don't have to question what we're thinking. People won't question that. They know what it is. I think we could spend a lot of time on this, but I think we've come to a conclusion. 3.
Great.
Great. So the last piece, just to revisit, take a quick look at your values here. So your current values, you have superior service, understanding, proactive, empowerment, respect, integrity, openness, and responsible. I think, through what we heard, the top values in general seem to be integrity, transparency, and as Sabine said at the outset, nobody's going to say that those are bad values or values that a municipality shouldn't have. But are there any on this list of 8 that you feel maybe we don't need? Like if you were to distill the most important values, which you see on the commentary below. And I think I'd like to ask a question about superior service, since we've just had a robust conversation, let's say, about superior service or high quality service. Is that really a value? It's kind of a thing that you provide, or that you strive to provide, or whatever it is that we're using.
I would agree. I don't think it really is a value. It's something that's actually an action.
Your mission.
It's your mission, right? So we want to do that, but I don't think it's a value. I think through our integrity, our respect, and our responsibility, we will provide superior service.
Yep. And what about these other values? Do we feel like they still resonate? Is there anything that's missing? A number of municipalities have started incorporating quite explicitly a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in their values.
What exactly do we mean by empowerment? Somebody tell me what that means. I'm not really sure.
So as a council, empowerment, giving our constituents empowerment, recognizing who they are, their value, their, giving them a voice. So when someone comes to you and has a concern, you're listening to them and giving them empowerment to be who they are and to be recognized. And that goes, for, I guess, for every constituent in our community. That's how I interpret it.
And I also look at it as empowerment of employees, right? You know, and we talk about flexibility. We've asked staff to be more engaged in certain decisions, and so it's looking at that. Maybe empowering individuals to be more engaged, something like that.
Generally, do we feel that maybe with striking superior service, because that's more of a thing that you do, then do we feel okay with the spread that remains?
I might even say that proactive would be also a service, right?
Yeah,
Being proactive as opposed to a value.
Yeah, it was funny you should say that, Helene. I was just about to respond. I was looking at proactive as well and thought, I don't know if that's really a value, is it? It's more of an action, I think. It's good action, and we should be. Some people have a problem with the word proactive, though, but I don't know. I don't see it as a value.
And in some ways, you could see it almost as a sub-value, let's say, of empowerment, right? That if you empower your staff, they can
Be proactive.
be proactive, bring
Right.
things forward to you. Empowerment could also be encouraging your staff to do things differently, bring new approaches, innovation,
Right.
that sort of thing. So that empowerment maybe is a bit broader than even what we thought here. So then you are left with 6. Understanding, empowerment, respect, integrity, openness, and responsible.
So if I can speak to responsible, is that fiscally responsible? I think that speaks to a really important piece that we do. We have to be fiscally responsible. Other than that, what does responsible mean?
I think you could broaden responsible. You could be irresponsible in some of your development decisions.
Oh, that's a good point.
So I just look at it generally as in our decision-making, we need to be responsible,
Which you'll recall you put in your updated mission statement.
kind of, yeah.
Responsible decision, somewhere in here.
So being responsible in all aspects of running the municipality, basically.
So are we moving transparency up to that top line?
One,
That seems,
one thing you could do is maybe, you have
Transparent.
openness here, you could do
Be transparent.
transparency instead
Yeah.
of openness.
yeah, that'd be good.
Would that include honesty as well? If you're talking about transparency, probably being
Yep.
honest.
Or
I'm thinking of the
integrity
7
even.
teachings, the 7 feathers.
Hmm.
There's a lot of value in those. They are values. There's 7 values that are represented, but honesty was one of them. But I guess transparency would fit into that.
Interesting, yep. Yeah. Fair. Well, integrity, right? Sort of, yeah. Transparent, responsible, integrity, respect, empowerment.
These feel about right, because one of the things with values is there are a lot of great values, but then it just becomes a laundry list, similar to the mission statement or the vision statement from before, where you feel like, well, we got to mention rec and we got to mention arts and culture and we got to mention affordability. Whereas, you know, these 6 values, do they mean something, mean enough, and distill kind of how you want to approach the work that you do when you come to make decisions?
I think we all approach what we do in this manner, you know, under all of these supporting words that allow us to do our work. I guess they can always be called into question, so we have to live by the words, don't we?
So, we're just putting this all together on a page, but your mission and your values. And then you've also got and you've got the 4 pillars as well that would fall beneath that. So, final thoughts?
I really like it. That's my final thought. I think, final answer, I think.
And when you pair it with this, does it feel like Huntsville? Do you feel like you could explain to your residents what this strategy is all about? Could we tell the 18-year-old what we mean?
I think so. Hard to say, but yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Cool.
Then on that note, our next step is to really take this away and clean it up and work with your staff just to finalize the elements of the strategic plan based on today's discussion. Then we will be returning to council on November 27th to present the draft strategic plan. And then your staff are going to carry out some public engagement on the draft plan for a couple of weeks so that we can, make sure that the public feels like this resonates with them and reflects what they told us as part of the engagement process. And then finally, staff will present the finalized strategic plan as well as, the details of the entire process in early January.
That's great. I'm glad there's another public consultation process because the 18-year-old also said, well, when does the public get an opportunity? So there we go. There it is, and there it is. So
Well,
that's great.
Thank you very much for your participation and by proxy, the 18-year-old who participated in this process. We appreciate everyone's input and their engagement. It really is through these workshops and, through the interviews that we conducted with all of you that we really get to a strategic plan that feels like Huntsville and isn't cookie cutter where you could just slap the name of any other municipality on the front. It's really to your credit because, we just spent some time wordsmithing, but you can say that you actually wrote the vision and mission, that we didn't write it, that it's yours, it's truly yours. And so you should feel good about that. We know that these sessions are long, but we are so appreciative of your engagement and quite pleased with the results, I think. So, thank you.
Thank you both. I have to say, from my perspective, it's a real pleasure working with both of you. You make this process that can often be, I think, a little tedious and whatever, actually a bit, dare I say, fun, which is really unusual and really great. So thank you both for your effort in this. All right, so I think that's, holy cow, I think we're sort of on time too. I have a motion moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Renwick. Be it resolved that confirmation bylaw 2023-122 be received and passed this 30th day of October 2023. All those in favor? That carries. And I have the final motion moved by Deputy Mayor Armour, seconded by Councillor Stone. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 1 p.m. All those in favor? And that carries